How are you all? As Will said, we have been here all week. We've been upstairs in the boardroom running our course, Soul Tour. It's a life, relationships, mental and emotional health course based on biblical principles for young adults. So we have had some of your guys there, as well as young adults from churches all over the city, and actually a few from out of town flew in for it as well. It's been really great. We actually, just a month ago, were in the Balkans, having a lovely time sightseeing and travelling around there. We went to Bulgaria, Albania, Bosnia, Serbia, Kosovo, Greece, Croatia. It was amazing, and we've got a few photos. If you can just go back to the one before. We actually were blessed by a heat wave. I say that sarcastically because it was over 40 degrees every day. It felt like there was a fan. Actually, it felt like there were 12 fan heaters on you all the time. It was crazy how hot it was. So we did a lot of swimming. We also did some sightseeing. So this is at Meteora, which is in Greece. It's a place where there have been monasteries. They're kind of perched up on top of rocks and cliff tops, and they've been there for 1,000 years continuously. So that was pretty amazing to see. And then we also went to the next photo. We went to the place where Lydia was baptized. Her baptism is described in Acts 16. She was the first Christian in Europe to be baptized. So these are my children, actually, Scarlett and Jasper. Scarlett's the girl, Jasper's the boy, just in case you thought we'd be controversial and switch their names over. And then we also, one of my favourite things was we were privileged to go to Philippi, to the ancient ruins of Philippi. And this photo here actually is the prison where Paul and Silas were imprisoned. And then they sang to the angels. They sang, and then the angel released them from prison. So we got to see that. It was interesting that there was no markings, no advertisement that this was the prison. We actually went there with a monk in training who told us that the government don't want to recognise that. So he said, come on, I'll show you this cell. So it was pretty wonderful. This morning I actually get to speak on a topic pretty dear to my heart, and I'm guessing it will be dear to many of your hearts as well, and that's the topic of how to have healthy relationships. You know, research is starting to suggest that with the explosion of technology, we're actually getting worse at it. We're getting worse at romantic relationships. We're getting worse at friendships. And yet Scripture certainly talks about the importance of good relationships. For a start, the second greatest commandment is to love your neighbour as yourself. You must love your neighbour as yourself. We're encouraged to reach out to others and bless them. Romans 12 verse 18 says, do all that you can to live at peace with one another. Often a challenging thing. And John 13 verse 35 says, by this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you have love for one another. So healthy relationships are what God wants for us, and I'm sure most of us want it too, right? But who knows that this is easier said than done? Yep, me, definitely. Historically, I was not good at friendships. For example, I had this one friend years ago. She was probably my best friend at the time. And one day, out of the blue, I got this email from her. And in the email, she said she was going to end our friendship. She was calling it off. I was quite shocked. I had actually no idea why she was doing it. So we sent a few emails back and forwards. I said, I'll do whatever it takes to fix our friendship. In the end, I said to her, please don't end it. Please don't end our friendship. And she replied, I'm not ending it. I'm stopping it. Because apparently that's different. Not really sure how. And I remember another time I was complaining because I was going through some stuff, and I was saying to Matt, none of my friends are being very helpful at the moment. They're not really supporting me. I'm kind of struggling. And he said to me, very compassionately, he said to me, well, that's because you're not very good at friendships. You pick the wrong kind of people to be friends with. Now, it wasn't so much that I was picking the wrong people. It was more that I was feeling compassionate for people, and I was reaching out to them. I'd actually become a rescuer. And when you're a rescuer, you start doing for others what they could and should do for themselves. And so I'd started to reach out to these people in pain and bring them into my world. But then when I was struggling, they weren't really able to help me because they were still struggling themselves. And so that just started me on this journey of trying to figure out what makes a good friend, like what makes me a good friend and what makes other people good friends. And one of the first things I realized was that actually I think there are three categories of people we need to have in our lives. So the first category would be the people who input into you, but they don't expect anything back. So they would be your mentors. They might be a supervisor, a counsellor, might be your youth pastor, might be parents, leaders, just people that will bless you and minister to you, but they have no expectations on you. And then the second category, they would be the people that we give to and we don't expect anything back. So the people in our lives that need discipleship or mentoring or support. So we pour into them, but we don't expect them to pour back to us. And then the third category, and I think this is a really super important one, are the equal friends. The people in our lives who, when we're struggling, they're there for us. When they're struggling, we can be there for them. So that's the category I've spent a lot of time working on over the years, and hopefully I'm going to be able to give you some input around what makes a good, safe friend and how you can be a good, safe friend for others. And so I just want to talk about 3 areas of life that can make a big difference to that. Bear in mind, this is not to write people off. It's definitely not about that. This is about getting a better understanding about some tools that make a healthy relationship so you can figure out where to position people in your lives, so you can understand them better and so you can get to a place where you have healthy but also realistic relationships in your life. Is that okay? Yeah. It's so weird to me that I'm on the screen. I don't think I've spoken in a church before I'm on the screen and half of you are looking that way and half looking that way. And every time I turn my head, I catch a glimpse of myself. How's my dress looking? I'm a big fan of dresses. All right, so the 3 things I'm going to chat about are honesty, humility, and trust. So Ephesians 4 verse 15 encourages us to speak the truth in love to one another as part of growing into maturity. So this is assertiveness, being honest with each other. And the thing is, if you can be honest with the people around you, there's no need for anger or undercurrents because you say what you need to before things escalate too much. Now, unfortunately, in New Zealand, we don't tend to be very good at assertiveness. It's not something we're renowned for. Instead, we tend to try to keep the peace. We maybe bottle things up. We don't want to rock the boat. We people please. We just kind of want to keep people happy. And I think there's 3 common reasons for that. The first one would be that a lot of people don't know how to be assertive. If you grow up in a family where your parents weren't assertive, they probably haven't role modeled it to you. You probably haven't kind of seen what it looks like. And so there are plenty of people in that boat. Or maybe assertiveness has been done badly, so you haven't had a good role model of it. And so if anyone out there is sitting there thinking, yeah, that's me, I actually have no idea how to really be assertive well, then a couple of recommendations. One would be find people who are good at assertiveness and learn from them, like watch them and observe how they do it. The other recommendation would be to get your hands on the Boundaries book. It's a book by Henry Cloud and John Townsend, and they are Christian psychologists, and they talk about the importance of boundaries. They talk about the way that God has boundaries, so that's all very biblically based, and then they give lots of great examples about how to do it well. I think the second reason that people are often not good at assertiveness is because we have associated assertiveness with really negative things. So we've seen it as unchristian, we've seen it as rude, controlling, manipulative, bossy, things like that. And so that puts us off, understandably, because we don't want to be those things. And so if that's you, if you're thinking, yeah, well, that's how I've always seen it, then my recommendation would be to start seeing it in a different light, to instead associate it with honesty or clarity, because that's the goal of assertiveness, is to be honest and to bring clarity into relationships. I think the third reason that we're often not good at assertiveness is we're afraid of the reaction we'll get if we try. We're afraid that people will reject us. We'll lose a friendship over it if we're honest with people. They will reject us for it. And I guess I want to encourage you that healthy people won't mind your honesty. They'll actually like it because then they'll know where they stand. They'll know what you really think and what you really mean if you can be assertive with them. And I guess you can get support for the people that don't handle it well. Because the problem is if we don't learn how to be assertive, we just end up bottling it up. We bottle it up, our frustrations, we bottle them up until we explode. And I often think about a couple I worked with recently, and they came to see me because he'd said to her, I want a divorce. And it was completely out of the blue for her. She was not expecting it at all. She had no idea. And that's because the actual main problem in their marriage was that while she was doing things that were frustrating him, he had no assertiveness skills. And so he hadn't told her, not even once, the things he was frustrated about. And as soon as he told her, she said, well, I'll do whatever I can to fix it. But by that point, he had had enough. She just never got a chance. So assertiveness, it's incredibly important. It's important that we're not just honest about what upsets us, though, but that we can also be honest about what we need from the people in our lives. So it might sound like saying, hey, the last 4 times we got together, I organised it. Would you mind organising our next catch-up? Or it might sound like saying, I've really loved hearing your story. Would you mind if I kind of shared with you how I'm doing now? According to research, far too many middle-aged men in New Zealand wake up one day and discover that they're lonely, that they've lost their friendships. This is a recurring theme in our country. And so this is where assertiveness would be really helpful for if you're sitting there thinking, yeah, I think that's kind of me, to actually reach out to old friends or to newer friends and say, I really value the friendship. Could we actually start spending some regular time together? That was something I loved about the Balkans. I just loved how families would hang out in the evenings and they would walk along the waterfront and eat gelatos because it was still like 39 degrees and you were dying. But I also loved that there were cafes that were just for men. And the men would gather together and they would hang out, have conversations, smoke. They smoked a lot. I didn't appreciate that. That was pretty gross. But I loved that they were just really keeping their connections going. And I think we could do better at that here. An interesting measure of your mental health is actually how honest your friends and family can be with you. And this is humility. So can you handle a challenge? Can you take correction? Can you admit when you're wrong? Can you learn and grow? Are you humble? I love to give dating advice. It's one of my favorite things, and I get to do it a lot as a counselor, which is wonderful. And it's a little bit of a miracle, to be honest, because historically I wasn't very good at romance. My early experiences were not too great. The first guy I ever kissed had just had cold sausage. He'd just eaten cold sausage, and he slobbered around my mouth, and I don't like cold sausage, so it was really quite gross. And I distinctly remember at the time thinking, oh no, I don't like kissing. That means I won't like sex. That means I won't be able to get married. I'm going to be single forever. I was panicking. I mean, that guy was a bad kisser, but at least he wasn't a double murderer, as my next kiss was. So as you can see, I didn't have a good history. However, I got it right with Matt. We've been married 20 years this year. It's pretty cool, eh? So I would say in the last decade, I reckon I've helped about 70 couples find love, either by helping them get bold enough to ask somebody out, or maybe helping them stop crucializing the decision whether to get married, or maybe helping them get over their fear of commitment. And I just love it. But I have to say that my number one piece of advice to anyone looking for a partner is always to make sure that you marry someone teachable. I just don't know. Other than their faith, I don't know what's more important than that. Because if your partner is not teachable, when things go wrong, they're not going to apologize. They're not going to back down. They're not going to get help. They're not going to go for counseling. They are just probably going to blame it on you, and you're going to be pretty stuck. So this is just a super important skill for us to develop. And the good news is there's only 3 things we need to know to become teachable, which I know from experience because I wasn't very teachable when I was younger. So here they are, 3 things. The first is that when someone is challenging you or trying to correct you, it's not about the messenger. It's about the message. It's about whether what they're saying is true or not. It doesn't really matter how someone says it, although if they're really rude, you probably want to address that. But it's really about whether there's any truth in the correction. Because as followers of Jesus, we should be lovers of truth. We should be people that want to grow and improve. And so regardless of who it is or how it's said, we can always learn from people. But, however, the second thing we need to do is we need to weigh the correction up. We need to figure out if it's true or not. People fall into 2 extremes with correction. Some people are completely unteachable. They won't take anything on at all. They're quite shut down. Other people are the opposite. They take everything on board and then they end up feeling inadequate. And so we need to go away. We need to weigh it up and figure out what's true about this correction, and then we can learn from that. And then the third thing, that like assertiveness, if you've had quite a negative association to correction, if you've seen it as rejection, for example, which a lot of people do, they tend to kind of combine the 2 together. If someone is correcting me, they're actually rejecting me. If you've seen it in a negative light, then I recommend putting correction into a positive light. So seeing it as an opportunity to change, an opportunity to grow, to become a better person. You can be vulnerable with a friend who's teachable, who's humble, and they can be vulnerable with you. When it comes to vulnerability, the last skill I want to talk about that's incredibly important is the ability to understand trust and do it well. To trust someone is to make yourself vulnerable to their decisions and judgments. And I think that's why so many relationships end up messy, because we haven't known how to trust well. And if you don't do trust well, you lose the intimacy, because you can't have intimacy or vulnerability without trust. There tend to be two ditches that people fall into with trust. So some people decide, I can't trust anyone, my survival's all up to me, it's too dangerous to trust people. And they become isolated and guarded. They may get married, they may have friends, but there are walls up. They're hidden, they're hiding away to keep themselves safe. The other extreme are the people that decide to trust anybody. They throw themselves into things. Unfortunately, that can set them up to be used or abused or ripped off. And then you get a variation of the extremes where people say, I don't trust any men, but I trust women. Or I don't trust non-Christians, but I trust Christians. Or I don't trust Christians that don't go to church, but I trust Christians that do. Or vice versa. And so relationships get messy. And when someone hurts us, we go, see, I knew I was right to not trust anybody because people just hurt you. Or we get really confused because we were so sure we could completely trust them. So I guess I want to say that the good news is there's a third way to do trust, and here it is. It's to understand that everyone is trustworthy somewhere in their lives, but no one is trustworthy everywhere in their lives. So the people in your life that you love and adore, that you think are fantastic, will let you down sometimes because they're human. And the people in your life that you think are totally untrustworthy, they're your most frustrating friend, will have areas where you can trust them. But that's challenging, right? Because it takes time to figure that stuff out. And that is another factor about trust, is that trust does take time. It takes time to develop trust because we need time to figure out where people are and aren't trustworthy. It's foolish to just give our trust away without checking people out first. Even God doesn't do that. Psalm 25, verse 14, it says, the secret of the Lord is for those who fear him. He will show them his covenant. Or another version of that is, the Lord confides in those who fear him. So in other words, there are some people that God doesn't share his secrets with because they haven't earned his trust yet. Crazy thought, right? So what do we do when it comes to friendships, relationships? Well, we take our time working out where people can be trusted. We think about their history. We watch them with other people. We see if they can handle correction, if they can handle our challenge. We look at what they do with their mental health issues, like if they deal with the stuff that they need to, or if it spills onto us. And it starts to give us a bit of a picture where we can position them. I have this friend. She's a great friend. We've been friends for maybe 30 years. She's very loyal, very faithful, a lot of fun. Totally untrustworthy with time, like totally. One day she rang me up and she said, hey, can I come over for a spa after dinner? I'll get there about 6:30. I said, yeah, that'll be great. At 9 o'clock, she rang me and said, I'm just leaving my house now. I was going to go to the supermarket on the way. Do you want anything? I said, maybe you should just come. We've already had dinner. At 11 o'clock, she rang me from her car in her driveway and said, I'm just about to drive out. Do you still want me to come? And I said, no, I'm going to bed. So now if you think about it, I would be pretty foolish to expect this friend to get me to an appointment on time or to get to the airport on time. Like if I expect her to do that, I'm going to be fairly disappointed. And so this is what we need to do, we need to set our expectations realistically of what people are capable of, not what we wish they were capable of. You may be interested to know there are 2 reasons people can be untrustworthy. So the first one is their mental health. If you have, or your friends have, unresolved trauma and issues from their past, if they have triggers and buttons that get pushed, sooner or later that stuff spills onto you. And it's not that they mean to hurt you, it's just that that stuff is sitting there waiting to be triggered. Now, obviously, the great thing about that is anyone can deal with their past. Anyone can get healed. Anyone can get through the grieving stuff they need to get through. So that stuff can change. The second reason that people can be untrustworthy is their strengths, their personality. My husband, Matt, this is him down here. He is a wonderful husband. I mean, he is so supportive. When I said to him, I want to become a counsellor, he quit his job so we could move cities so I could become a counsellor. And it was a job he loved, passionately. When I said to him, I want to write novels, he said, sure, we'll put whatever money into it that we need to, and you can write some novels, which we have for sale later if you're interested. And he had never even read my writing. He didn't even know if I could write. So pretty supportive. There's a cafe in Christchurch that he often takes our kids to when I'm working late, and I went there for the first time just recently. And when I walked in, they said to me, "Hey, are you Jasper and Scarlett's mum?" And I was like, "Yep." And they said, "Man, you have such a great husband. He is such a good dad to your children." It's pretty cool, eh? However, yeah, give him a clap first before I get to the next part. However, there's always a however, because none of us are perfect. He's not very good at details. He's just not very good at all. And so over the 20 years we've been married, this is what I've learnt to do if I want something from the supermarket. I will say to him, "Honey, can you put down what you're doing and look me in the eyes? This is what I need from the supermarket. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. Repeat them back to me." So he will do that. And then I've written a list for him, and I put it in his hand, and I close his fingers over the list. I feel like the people laughing are like, I have to do that too. And then when he leaves, I text him the list as well. Now, you would think he would get it right, wouldn't you? That's like 3 ways for him to get it right. But this is what happens 95% of the time. He forgets what I asked for because he maybe wasn't focused enough. He walks 3 steps, puts the list down, and keeps going. So I find it when he's gone. And he doesn't take his phone with him, or he doesn't check his phone until he gets home. And he brings 5 different things back and says, "Isn't this what you wanted? I'm sure you asked for this." So now the reason Matt's like that is not because he's got bad mental health in this area. It's because he's not very good with details. His strengths, his wiring means he's a big picture visionary person. He's not a small details person. And so I've had to learn to adjust my expectations of that accordingly and not expect what I want from the supermarket or get it myself. The good news is that if trust has been broken, as it often is, as it will be in your relationships because of the humanness of our relationships, the good news is that trust can be re-earned. And there's a simple 3-step process to re-earn trust. So the first step is to figure out where the trust has been broken, and it has to be specific. What exactly has happened? Is it a money issue? Is it a fidelity issue? Is it a gossip issue? What specifically has gone wrong? What specifically has wounded you? The second step is for the person who's been wounded to work out exactly what it will take for the offender to re-earn their trust. What will it take for them to be able to trust again, that their partner or their friend is not going to repeat this with them? And then if both people agree, yep, this is what we're going to try and do to re-earn the trust, if the person who's done the wounding goes away and does it, then the trust will be re-earned over time. I'll just give you a couple of quick examples and then I'll finish up. I worked with a couple pretty recently where it came out that he'd been lying to everyone. He'd been lying to her, had been lying to his friends, and it was to make himself look better. And so the 3 things that we worked out that she needed him to do to trust him again, the first was she needed him to be more honest with her about embarrassing things, because he would lie about embarrassing things to look better in her eyes. So she wanted more honesty about his weaknesses and struggles, basically. The second thing she asked him to do was to tell all his friends that he'd been lying, so he couldn't keep getting away with it. And he did that. It was very hard for him to do, and it was sort of like he dropped a bomb in his friendship group for a while, but he got through that. And then the third thing she asked him to do was get counselling to find out why he felt the need to lie. Because we do these things for a reason. You know, a baby's not born as a liar. They develop that as a way to cope with something. And I think counselling is often an important part to put on the rebuilding trust framework, because unless you know why someone's done what they've done, you've got no guarantee they won't do it again. There's no way to know that. One more example, I've worked with actually quite a few couples, unfortunately, where there's been infidelity in the relationship. And the 3 common things that the wounded person has asked for, the first is that they know for certain that all contact has been cut with the person that the infidelity was with. And maybe they need to see the text, maybe they need to hear the phone call. The second thing they ask for is full access to their technology, because you're obviously going to start being pretty worried and paranoid if this has happened. So they want to check that nothing's going on still. And then the third thing again is often counselling. Let's find out why you've been unfaithful, what has driven this. I hope this has given you some good ideas around trust. In fact, I hope this has given you some good ideas around your friendships in general. I think that it's an area we can all work on improving. So if if as you've sat there listening, you've thought, yeah, honesty is something I'm not great at. I haven't really done that well with my friends. Then hopefully I encourage you to upskill in the area of assertiveness. If it's humility that you realize you haven't been too good at, then I'm hoping those 3 tips around being teachable will encourage and inspire you to become teachable and humble. And if it's trust, I'm hoping that some of you will take the step of fixing broken trust, reaching out to relationships that are broken and having some conversations around how do we rebuild our trust. But also that will help you understand how to set realistic expectations for people. You know, healthy relationships are a precious commodity, and I certainly believe God is keen for us to have them too. I think I'll finish by praying for you guys, if that's all right. Lord, we thank you that your heart is to bring comfort and healing where we need it, the relationships around us where there is brokenness, that you want to bring comfort and healing, that you want to bring wisdom and revelation where we're lacking it, that you want to help us upskill, that you want to bring the tools that we're lacking where we're lacking them. And so we look to you, Father, to bring those things to us. And where people have very broken relationships here in this room, wherever they do, we ask for a miracle. Sometimes the only thing that's going to make a difference is you bringing a miracle of some kind, bringing conviction, bringing revelation, stepping in. And so that's what we ask you for, Lord, for those that need it. Thank you that your desire is that we would love one another as we have been loved by you. Amen.